You're my friend and that's a code of ours. It's the end, so let's just play the odds. You're my friend and that's a code of ours. Sing along to the end, yes you know, baby. We're your friends and take it in the arm. Everyone to the end, something. You call me friend now, that's a call to arms. Stick around to the end, something. Call your friend, so that's a call to arms. Stick around till the world stops thinking. Eyes from the street. You call my name. This is no lie. 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 Call my name. This is no lie. 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 This is no lie.
What's up, everybody? Back here. Back at it with a perfect moon tonight. Oh my gosh, really amazing. What are we at? 38.5% waxing crescent moon. I'm hiding this Earthshine portion, which also looks amazing tonight. Coming in here, 8:15 p.m. East Coast. Beautiful skies after the storm. Good to see my fam in the chat. I see Plain Truth, Genghis Khan, Ayad, Hassan Kamel. What's going on, Doc? Carolina, what's happening? Hope you're doing great tonight. Let's play some tunes, let our family show up, and then we'll do a trip tonight. Pretty good one. Ocean's Electric tonight. Speaks for itself.
Same damn body,
get started right away. I'll be talking about it a lot anyway, so it doesn't matter. Let's just go right in because I zoomed in as our first little excursion in. This is the camera with the focal reducer and an extender tube, so it's the widest shot on the 8. But it gives us good kind of compositing if we go in on a 2x multiplier here, or the 5.9 up at the top, which is just 2x the size. Then we get a much wider view, but also a zoomed in shot, so it's kind of a nice balance here. Main thing to talk about is we're looking at Sea of Serenity. I got my GPS tracker in tonight. I feel like the tracking is a lot more stable. But let's just see, I mean, it's a perfect example of what I talk about when I say pentagon or hexagon on the moon. And you can see that Sea of Serenity is very much pentagonal right here. Just pulling up the drawing program so I can show it to you correctly. We'll trace the outline, Sea of Serenity, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So, and of course, the Sea of Tranquility, hexagonal top, Chrysium over here, hex Proclus, whoops, Proclus at the 2. Do that. Yeah, Proclus right here. And then the amazing feature that, again, I wanted to show last night, but we'll get a shot tonight. This is Pasadonius, which is very interestingly, one of the most interesting craters or features on the moon. It's flat-floored, but it's got multi-tiered different rings, and it also has sinuous rills. It also has a central or micro craterlet in it. It's a great candidate for exploration. But what's more interesting, or at least equally interesting, is that it lies at the vertex, or right at the corner or edge of a larger feature, which is the Sea of Serenity right here. So it's very important to note this because you'll see Sinus Iridum, Bay of Rainbows on the rim of Mare Imbrium. You'll see Gassendi on the rim of Mare Humorum. You'll see other features on the rim of like Mare Nectaris. So it's pretty particular. It's like you'll get craters on the rims of larger craters, but you'll also get larger craters on the rims of mares, which is one step further than what Thunderbolts says, or Stuart Talbot says. But I think it's really important to note that because that kind of, from that you can infer the fractal nature of it. The magnitude just goes far and far down and far up, and it repeats the same shape where you get like the diamond ring feature, so features on the rings of larger features. Up and down the chain. Let's see if anybody hopped in here. I'm just chatting. So yeah, why is it hexagonal or pentagonal here? The thing to note is that things start off circular and expand omnidirectionally, or spherical rather, like a bubble, but if you're thinking two-dimensionally. So this something boiled the surface of the moon, and this feature grew as a circle and went outwards and ultimately met resistance. And this is what actually that nature is trying to reach equilibrium, or strongest shape. And you could say that this like pentagonal, hexagonal formation is one of these mudras when you meditate and do zazen, or if you're sitting in meditation and you make the hand gestures. This idea of pentagon to hexagon, pentahexa, is kind of a relationship of entropy to neg-entropy, or chaos into order. And so you have Sea of Serenity being a pentagonal shape against Mare Tranquillitatis, or Sea of Tranquility, being a hexagonal shape. And you see in nature this shape, this side-by-side kind of imbalanced symmetry, I want to say, slightly imbalanced symmetry. And that denotes the wiggle of the universe, but also the packing of the universe. So things pack, so circles end up emerging, and circles end up recognizing one another. They have spatial awareness, because at every circle there's a center that recognizes spatial awareness, and as circles end up pushing against each other because they are still expanding, you end up getting flat or straight edges here. So if that happens on every side of a circle, you have circles pushing in on each side, so circle packing or bubble packing will end up creating much sharper, more defined primitive geometric shapes like pentagons, hexagons, nonagons, like we saw And this is, I think, really how it actually occurs, because it's a relationship between self and field, or Sea of Serenity, and its surrounding area. Its environment is informing it. So let's get rid of all that stuff. So we'll look more at it. The other thing I wanted to note, my tracking is not perfect, clearly, but not bad. Anyway, the other little thing, or important thing, are these braids, electrical braids that we saw yesterday, right under the terminator line that was cutting. And I showed you this kind of cool forked tongue braid over here. Now we see more of it happening over here all the way across Sea of Serenity, and look at that little craterlet right along the Birkeland filament outline. It's one of these things that we can, it's basically like stars on a string, or pearls on a chain, or stars on a magnetic rope, or Birkeland current. There are all these different terms for it, but if you really consider it, it's all the same thing. It's really essentially the universe is filled with all these wires. These wires are in dark mode or in glow mode, and they leave imprints everywhere, on your hand, on the surface of the moon, when you have static charge, when you take electric plate photography. And they are basically the interaction between things is not emptiness, but a connection, an electrical connection, or an ocean electric. All right, a few more tracks here, and then I'll get back and talk more about it, and maybe we'll zoom in here and look at Pasadonius. Did I not say that's what it was called? So Pasadonius crater is this crater at the rim of Sea of Serenity, which I love so much. All right. Getting in here, I see this song. I'm sure some of y'all know it.
Boxes and boxes, your infinite toxins, all got something to say. Indestructible ideas are vanishing. Wandering away. The nation
All right, little strut in the house. I see some more folks joining. Let's see. What's up, Sensei Camilo? Great to see you. Tony with an I. Awesome footage and great thinking. Wondering about it all. Thanks for sharing. My pleasure. Good to see you. Welcome, and feel free to ask any type of question. But if you are new, I feel like you are new, please check out the playlists that I've made. It's a lot of good compiled information in them, and they're organized. So cool. All right, I wanted to hop in here between songs just to talk about all this amazing geometry and connectedness. So I was talking about Sea of Serenity. So we had imprints of electrical braids on the surface of Sea of Serenity. We had Ptolemaeus, which is a crater on the rim of Sea of Serenity, like craters on the rims of larger craters. And also now I wanted to show you Sea of Tranquility. I busted up the color a little, busted it up. I turned up the color a little bit and the levels just so we can see a bit more contrast between the different features. So to the right we've got Mare Crisium, or Sea of Crises, and to the left we've got Sea of Tranquility, Mare Tranquillitatis. And I'm pulling up my drawing program here so we can scribble a little bit, and I can show you this more of this geometry. So again, like I was saying, circle expands outwards, meets boundary layers or other kind of density pressure, and tries to create equilibrium. And then what do you get? You get very sharp corners and edges from a circular object. So a circle, if you've ever used a program before like Photoshop or Blender or something like that, you'll notice that a circle is actually just a series of points along that follow a certain curve and ultimately end up back around. And so an inorganic circle is just these points wiggling. And a simpler circle, that what happens here is that a circle can be simplified down to something like a pentagon or a hexagon or a dodecahedron. But a circle, really, like a fine circle, probably has about 32 sides if you're really thinking about it in that sense. So, Sea of Crises, or Mare Crisium, very clear hexagonal formation. Why hexagonal? Like I just said, omnidirectional expansion to pressurized zones, finding equilibrium, creating this. We got Pierce and Picard, two microcraterlets that form really in a way that if you look at it, it's almost like a stingray or a crab. It just forms where eyeballs would form in this geometry. The same way, if you look at the bridge of your own eyes, you'll see that they are hexagons. And this, in a way, not in a way, very distinctly specifically is that as well. So that is, let me just adjust this image a little bit. So this is something, again, where I saw the initial thing about hexagons on the moon was on Thunderbolts Project, right? So Thunderbolts Project, if you type in moon in Thunderbolts, you'll get about 4 or 5 videos. And Stuart Talbot has talked about Brian J. Ford and Ralph Jurgens and Velikovsky. And 3 of them postulated this idea of electric arcing causing lunar surfaces, like boiling the surface of the moon or moving across the surface, creating craters and little archetypes that we see. But really, outside of that, there's not much of that discussion really anywhere else. But in those videos, Thunderbolts basically, or Space News, or Stuart Talbot talks about this thing where, craters on the rims of larger craters, the fact that electric arcing, there's no evidence that it couldn't be electric arcing, right? There's no real proof against electric arcing versus cratering. But they don't really talk about hexagons in the way that I'm talking about it. And so it's not really an ego trip, it's more that this seems to me like the bigger thing here, that almost all the craters and surface features on the moon are actually hexagonal, dodecahedral, octagonal, hexagonal, and there's a reason for that, and the reason is fractality, inherent fundamental geometry, trying to find this idea between the pent and the hex, the entropy versus negentropy, the idea of organization, how this looks like patterns, because humans are also emergent forms, animals are emergent forms from the fundamental geometry with boundless intelligence of consciousness. I know those were a lot of ideas kind of at once, but this is why I talk about it so where I find it so important. I feel like it's one of those things that I wish Thunderbolts kind of would expand upon the moon electric arcing and kind of go into like why things are hexagonal, for example, and also note that you have craters on the rims of mares, not just small craters on the rims of larger craters. All right, there's a lot of thoughts trying to get them out. I see, you see the Krabby Patty? Cool. So, Frederick Fogg says, glad to see you safe and sound and back up and running. I feel very lucky about that for sure. Tampa dodged one again. I did have faith, though, even though I did end up evacuating. I capitulated to some of the pressure, and that was probably a good idea, but I was nervous about my gear. Thankfully, the house was great. Power was up, so I'm coming at you once again, and the skies are just absolutely incredible after the storm. I gotta say, like some of the clearest blue I've ever seen. So we're being blessed with some amazing astronomy nights. Atavium, what's happening? If sun will nova every 12K years, would that leave an impact? I know I've heard that idea of the sun going nova, but I think I've moved away from these ideas that well, that's not true. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think something that's gone nova necessarily will. I just don't know if there's any proof of that necessarily, but it's possible. It's definitely possible. I mean, the idea of things happening about 12,000 years ago could include comets having 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 comets moving close to Earth, creating electrical imbalances. That's one thing. So insane weather might have happened. So the catastrophes that the electric universe proposes are very varied, and so Clark Mythos Test has done a lot of work on that. I feel like Suspicious Observers has his whole thing about how the sun goes nova or X-class solar flares affecting the atmosphere. You have Smash-O-Ash, is it? You have a lot of people who really follow the solar weather and how that affects everything around it. But I guess I tend not to. I feel like that part of space is really covered at this point. I tend to move away from the doomsday theory of it. If it happens, it happens. Otherwise, the sun is actually an amazing conscious star right now. But what I have changed about is how our sun might fit into the metamorphosis or evolution of a star, and how Earth might be much older than the sun. And we'll talk about that more, but I'm going to try and finish up the thought here about the hexagon against hexagon. So we got the hexagon of Mare Crisium, we got Proclus, which is Proclus, a very interesting feature. It's not glowing very brightly tonight, but it's really right at the center of where a Z-pinch would happen. So this is where a Z-pinch, I believe, would happen if you have a coaxial Birkeland electric current moving across, and this would be a 2D imprint of a 3D Birkeland current. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same way like we as geometry draw, and we draw geometry. This is recursive fractalization of carving material symbols or shapes into space. And so an electric arc moving across the surface would leave its shape in the surface, so to speak. So here you have the pinched plasma tube, or the pinched Birkeland current. You have counter-rotating rings. You have the Z-pinch, or the Markland convection, where the two wires converged. Then you have, to the sides of it, two hexagons. So Sea of Tranquility right here is just a giant hexagon against Mare Crisium, which is a smaller hexagon. And this is something that, like, really just, I can't unsee it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. But really, I think this is a huge part of the moon discussion that just I'm having by myself, pretty much. I guess I'm having it with y'all. But, like, I don't think anyone actually talks about this. Even Gareth, I just saw Gareth's video, and he did a thing about crater impact versus electric, which is great. But I think the hexagonal nature of it is so important, because what is the hexagon? Not just as it boundary layers meeting, but it's also, if you look at the cross-section of a lightning bolt or a Birkeland current, it's nested hexagons. Or it's nested primitive geometry, basically. One's going that way, one's going that way, one's going that way, one's going that way. So you have counter-rotating rings of hexagons or pentagons, basically moving in and out of wiggles. So if you're looking at a lightning bolt, the cross-section of a lightning bolt is nested shells. And at the center, this is essentially what's happening at the top of Saturn, where we see the hexagonal storm, or Jupiter, or the aurora. Our aurora outline nested hexagons. If you look up Don Scott's model on Thunderbolts Project, he actually talks about counter-rotating rings and shows actual evidence for all the planets having a Birkeland filament going through the poles, the magnetic poles. And the Birkeland filament outlines a hexagon, and therefore we have hexagons. So it's not, I don't want to say it's not mysterious. It's mysterious because nobody looks into it, but it's not mysterious if you just realize what it actually is, and we have the evidence for it. Yeah. So there's a good question here before I get back to the tune. So let's see. Well, let me take in this thing. So they even find ancient hexagon shapes at the bottom of the ocean, supposedly left by some organism. Well, it's easy enough to say that hexagons are left by anything because we ourselves, like humans, animals, creatures, bacteria, earths, are all emergent of the same consciousness using the same fundamental geometry at fractal scales. And therefore you could say a giant creature left it at the bottom of the ocean. You could say that a giant lightning bolt left it at the bottom of an ocean. And it would kind of mean the same thing in a way. I imagine that is something like that. So let's see. Since Camilo says, if the moon is hollow, what would the hexagonal geometry do to the underworld? Does this make planets more sound in structure? Just rambling. So there's a really good concept that I heard from Jeffrey Walensky on stellar metamorphosis, where I'll reiterate that in a moment. Just saying what's up to Rockstar. Great to see you. Long time. Yo Q, what's happening? Alien head. So here we go. So Jeffrey Walensky proposes that stars end up evolving into planets. So we have two different ideas. One being the nebular hypothesis, where stars end up in accretion. Stars end up having accretion disks, so rings around it made out of debris, and this debris fuses together and creates planets and moons. On the flip side, stellar metamorphosis says that no, actually stars end up becoming planets ultimately. Not all stars, but some stars become planets by losing their atmosphere, losing their spin, and essentially baking a fully formed planet at its core until ultimately the atmosphere meets the core and you get something like an Earth. And at that point, Earth is capable of producing a fractalized version of life, which ends up being creatures, plants, and animals. And I think that is a much more holistic understanding of things. And so if that's the case, and Earth was a star at some point, it captured the moon, let's say, and the moon is maybe very, very old, where the moon was also a star, and maybe an Earth, and ultimately desiccated and died. And so moon's bones, basically. Moon is a calcified planet, let's say. And so the moon was captured by the star Earth, and in this case, what's interesting is that a star would actually, by gravitational collapse or by electrical oscillation, would attract tons of space debris. And therefore, the Earth star it actually creates a physical, tangible way that the Earth may have experienced massive meteor showers, like the Great Bombardment. So if the moon was captured by the Earth, then this Great Bombardment actually happened to the star Earth and hit the backside of the moon and created it in this kind of way where there are very few real features, no real mares or anything. Now the side of the moon facing Earth star at the time may have been melted and connected by these giant Birkeland filaments to a star Earth, and therefore we have this kind of fractalized oceanic looking front of the moon that's completely different than its far side. Granted, I can't see the far side. None of us can really see it without agency record. Some people believe it, some people don't. I imagine that it's very hard to fake an image of the far side of the moon, so the stuff that we have, I think, is real. Like, I feel like robots can go behind the moon. And if that's the case, then this idea that one side of the moon is heavily cratered all the way up and down, and then the side that we see is this very intricate assortment of geometry. Therefore, you could have both electric arcing, creating these giant oceans with these perfect geometries, and on the other side, you could have a huge impact field, and it would make sense to have two different types of surfaces. And that's pretty fascinating. Like, I haven't ever heard anyone talk about it like that, and to me that was, I'm just repeating what Jeffrey said, but when I heard that I thought, okay, that's an actually reasonable explanation for how what we see on the surface of the moon looks both like impact related, like strewn rocks and giant showers of meteorites, but it also looks like electric arcing moved across the surface, creating very specific shapes. So maybe this is how the Earth was tethered to the moon, but the Earth right now couldn't create these types of interactions with the moon, but the Earth as a evolving star with this type of energy that it had may have actually, as it was cooling and as it was losing atmosphere, it was spewing it all over the surface of the moon, so to speak, and melted the surface. And that, like, very fascinating idea. I see Gerald Frank in the chat, and I see Amy G. What's up, Amy G? Lovely to see you. Isn't it so amazing? It's so sharp tonight. So let me get wide again. Look at this shot here. Pretty remarkable moon, I have to say. So Gerald Frank says hexagons in structured water and is Asian Pakua, which is the most powerful shape anywhere. So yeah, I completely see that. It's one of these things where when you look for hexagons, you'll find them everywhere. But if you look for reasons as to why they exist, you'll get a lot of speculation. Where I thought about it was, okay, we have honeycomb, we have basalt columns, we have lunar mare and cratering, we have molecules, molecular structures, sugars, crystals. If you look at electron microscope images of sugar crystals, you look at the human face or any face of any creature and you'll see side-by-side hexagons. You look at water, you look at snowflakes, nested hexagons. So on and on and on, we have these very intricate edges and corners. And then you look up, why is that the case? And you find a lot of, like I said, speculation, a lot of guesswork, a lot of like hemming and hawing and trying to explain why this happens. At some point, you'll get to a place where I've heard some people mention this very strong shape. So hexagons end up packing, circle packing. That's how we have hexagon nesting. But I think it's even more important to notice that like your eye sockets frame out as two hexagons side by side. And so I think it's not just circle packing and boundary layers, but it's also that hexagons are a strong shape in nature. I forgot to mention bubbles, of course. So bubbles, if you look at them, are not spherical. They're actually hexagonal, pentagonal, dodecahedral. So yeah, that type of stuff, I think when you find it, there has to be some sort of rationale for it. And then you think about it from a conceptual sense and a linguistic sense, and you'll see that our letters are these hexagons, the shapes of our words are hexagons, the shape of crystals are these hexagons, and on and on. I think there's actually a lot of relevance to discussing it, talking about it. And of course, for something like looking at lunar geology, it's something that absolutely almost no one talks about. I see Rich Goad in there. What's happening? It says, amazing how close up you're getting on the moon. Sweet video. Hell yeah. Thank you, Rich. What's that? Is that like something that crossed across? So this is the wide shot on the 8-inch scope, the super wide. This is to get everything. And now let's take a look at the dark side of the moon, the dark side. But or the earth shine, as they call it, the reflection of the earth light, by turning up the aperture and opening up the aperture and the ISO, turning up the ISO here. Let's play a couple of tunes while I do that. Call it Light of the Moon, I guess. It's pretty pertinent. 8:49 p.m., Edge of Space, Light Out of the Void. little trip over there, playing some Golden, doing some contrast shots, getting my chair real squeaky. Gosh, I definitely need a new chair for this back room. All right. Great to see everybody. I see Mary in there. Thanks for checking in on me, Mary. All is well. Thank you. Let's see. XRP Hitman says, thoughts on the lunar wave footage. So I assume you've never heard me talk about that before, but I have a lot of experience with the lunar wave. And I've actually caught a lunar wave, Jupiter wave, and a Saturn wave. So if you go to this link, I don't know if anyone knows about this. We haven't talked about a lunar wave in a long time, but this is the playlist of my captures. And I also have a playlist of what I think a lunar wave actually is. And so this one is a playlist that I made that actually shows other people's lunar waves. And at the end of it, you'll see that there are two videos. One is called Shockwaves, Shadows, and Shockwave, Shadows, and Ultra Slow Motion. And so you'll see what happens at basically the wake of a bullet creates really similar qualities that we see in the lunar wave. The double pulse, the very sharp edge that moves across. And then at the very end, 2040 video in 8 seconds shows explaining a lunar wave, and you'll see that it's essentially footage of a shockwave, an audible, like basically breaking the sound barrier, but the visual of that. And so it's possible that a lunar wave is an experimental object or experimental missile or rocket, a supersonic jet, or anything really breaking the sound barrier within view of the moon, as opposed to airplane turbulence, which is what was proposed by other channels. Yeah, moon waves is just crazy. Anyway, those are the two playlists, but the really cool ones are really the Jupiter wave, which I caught, and then this other guy in Ireland caught, and then the Saturn wave, which I think is one of a kind one. But definitely haven't seen one in a very long time. That was Crow's thing way back in the day, catching the lunar waves. Awesome, awesome. All right, so I wanted to hop in here, talk a little bit more. So we started off with the close-up of Sea of Serenity, and I showed you the pentagonal nature of that with the Ptolemaeus crater. And then we went down to Sea of Tranquility, and we took a look at Mare Crisium, Proclus, Tranquility, and saw how those were side-by-side hexagons. And now I've zoomed into Mare Nectaris, Nectar, Sea of Nectar, and we also have the chain of craters next to it, Theophilus, Cyrillus, and Katharina. We also have Fracastorius, which is this semi-crater. Let's look at it a little bit more with scribbles, because then I can show you what I'm talking about. So here we have, remember I was telling you how there are craters on the rims of larger craters, craters on the rims of mares. This is another prime example of hexagonal formation. So here we have Mare Nectaris, Sea of Nectar, pretty good hexagon. And then we have Fracastorius, which is also hexagonal, and it's reminiscent of Sinus Iridum in Mare Imbrium. It's reminiscent of Ptolemaeus on the edge of Sea of Serenity, right? So we have this kind of recursive fractaling of large craters on the rims of Mare, or Maria. And then right here again, like Proclus and Mare Crisium, look, you even have the two like micro craterlets, like I said, like the crab shape. And so the symmetrized shape right above this again is, here we have the Birkeland filament, so we have the pinched plasma tube, or the hourglass shape, or the hypotrochoid, Ken Wheeler. And then you have the hexagonal shape, which is the strong shape in nature, the organized negentropic shape, which is also the outline of the human brow. And then the nose would appear here. And so essentially our eyeballs form on the dielectric inertial plane, basically a line that is compressed down the side of this. So if you turned it sideways, it's also the hourglass. It's also the infinity sign. There's that. It's also the cross-section, two-dimensional cross-section of a torus, or a donut. So that's Mare Nectaris and Fracastorius. Just a little bit about it. And then what else do we have? So let's look here. Let me zoom in one more layer. So I removed the extender tube. This is the camera with an f6.3 focal reducer, so we can get much closer still, but this is still not like wide enough. So right, Theophilus, Cyrillus, and Katharina. These are a little bit more eroded or smoothed out, so it's not completely hexagonal, but you can see that Katharina does have corners. They all really do. But if we draw them, you'll see, let's draw the edges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's say 9. So it's a nonagon or an octagon. And then you have what I was telling you earlier, where you have two bubbles expanding, and then they meet a boundary layer. And this is an interesting one because there is kind of overlap a little bit, but still, they didn't really merge. They just created this kind of stuck boundary between them. Each of these, so right, Cyrillus, if we draw the lines, that is definitely hexagonal over there. And Katharina, see some more corners here. Again, these are irregular shapes because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Septagons, octagons, the Decepticons. What's cool about Katharina is that you have a nested hexagon within a hexagon that kind of double outlines the shape. All of these you can really zoom in and see them for yourselves. I'm just pointing out where they are. Very cool about Theophilus right here is that it's one of the particular craters with a very intense kind of pine cone or quadruplet little mountain peak center peak. These in the mainstream realm, these are remnants of an impact. So an impact came in, matter fell out, matter filled up the floor, and then you see essentially the peak, and that's what a crater looks like from the side. But electrical arcing could have created kind of a bubble of electrical plasma that after the electrical arc disconnected, like magnetic reconnection, like disconnected its voltage from the center, it left a pinched set of parameters here that kind of outlined those cascade upwards. So these are actually, if we talk about the surface, we kind of get an electric arc going like that, pulling up matter at the center, almost like filaments around a magnet, for example, or ferrofluid. And it's much more so that you had surface features that weren't really that excavated. They're much more like blisters that kind of had walls that were pulled up and center peaks that were pulled up by electric coalescing. So those are some thoughts here. Let's get back to the tunes for a moment. But yeah, so 3, 4 now different sets and different interesting like variations on the side-by-side hexagon. But it's not just really the side-by-side hexagon. It's more that you have these donuts, you have the inherent fundamental geometry that not only are human beings created out of, but that are also on the surface of the moon. And it's absolutely fascinating to me that it's so. Alright, those were a lot of songs from Captain of the Stars. Let's go to Call in My Mind. Do some Call in My Mind. I haven't played this one in a while.
Ready to feel the call.
So coming in here, rotated the camera a little bit. Let's stay on this wide shot, this Cheshire Cat smile moon. You can see all these amazing interlocking hexagons here. I guess I can scribble a tiny bit more here just because why not? Let me pull up this image over here. So we got an image of a butterfly. And you can see that the shape that I'm talking about is the same shape that outlines a butterfly, which is a Birkeland filament. And so here, if we draw out the wings, you'll see it's also an apple. But that's really what's going on here, is that a butterfly is actually outlining a coaxial Birkeland filament, or Birkeland current. It's also DNA strand, right? And this is the hexagon that we see. This is the infinity sign. This is the orbital plane, where planets emerge. This is the center, the Z-pinch. You also have two Z-pinches, the eyes, right? And the body essentially goes in and out like a wavefront. So this is the same thing that's going on here, where you have the Birkeland filament, the twisting Birkeland filament. So here is the pinched plasma tube, the hypotrochoid, or the hourglass. So that's similarity, that's asimilarity. And then same thing with this apple, it's exactly the same thing. And the apple also outlines the Birkeland current and almost looks exactly like that. The one thing to note here about the apple shape is that, especially when you eat the apple, you end up with the actual hypotrochoid. But really the relationship between seed and flesh is something I've talked about, and it's worth talking about since I showed an apple. But the idea that, you know, seeds of an apple contain the information to create another tree, and how the flesh of an apple doesn't have that ability. And what's the relational volume of seed to flesh is kind of the same ratio of maybe matter to non-matter. Maybe it's enlightened to unenlightened, or ignorant. Maybe it's performer to audience, or government to populace. You have this relationship between seed and flesh of apple that you can use to derive an incredible amount of information from about culture and the world by watching the apple grow. And if you think an apple is conscious, or you don't think an apple is conscious, then you may want to rethink that, because how does the apple know how to grow and how to place the seeds where it does, and also when you take an apple to another place and plant it and get another tree, what's actually going on there. So I can talk more about that, but it's true though. I mean, this is this is stuff that I've derived simply from, you know, starting off with Electric Universe, where really the premise is that everything is connected, and then you see these Birkeland currents and you're like, oh, of course, like quantum mechanics says that things are connected via electricity. We have an electric power grid. When people review a human body, or when people observe a human body or try to take tests, it's all done with electrical equipment. And on and on and on, except somehow in the mainstream, space doesn't have electricity, and electricity doesn't dominate space. It's kind of crazy, right? That everything is electrical, and yet space somehow doesn't. And the reason for that is that it would really change a lot of things that exist right now in the current paradigm of space, like the Big Bang and like the expansion, redshift, speed of light. All these things would have to be rethought and reimagined from the context that actually light doesn't travel, that the fundamental core of nature is structured geometry, so the imprint of a kind of God intelligence. Fractalization being and electromagnetism being a primary force. And even further, let's say you took it further, you'd have to kind of admit to consciousness being even more fundamental than even geometry and matter. Because really when string theory kind of breaks it down, you realize that everything is ultimately a unified, singular, boundless intelligence, and then everything emerges from that. That explains how everything is the same thing, and how we're all an aperture of God. So it is interesting, you know. I could easily put the image of the butterfly or the apple up against the moon and put kind of spooky music to it. You could say that my music is spooky, but not really. Like, I'm not trying to be like, ooh, isn't that amazing? I'm kind of saying a little bit of that, but mostly like, of course it's that. Of course the butterfly looks like the crater, looks like the bridge of the nose, looks like a molecule, looks like honeycomb, looks like bubble packing. Because the structured unified universe is lattice structures, is entropy, negentropy, is hexagonal packing, is the universe being conscious of itself and trying to find the most ordered system it can, the strongest system it can, and it manifests as this geometry. And there's no like really weird mystery about it. It's actually very empowering to embrace it as concept, as fact. I mean, that's how I feel about it. So when I look at the moon now, you see all these hexagons and pentagons, and not only is it just like, holy shit, no one really notices that, but more so, like, I understand why that is the case, and to imagine that Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility outline the shape of a butterfly or an apple or the bridge of the nose is kind of amazing. And it makes you also, it allows people who love pattern recognition to be, again, to also be empowered, because typically now, mainstream thinking is to brush off people who see things in patterns. But in fact, we are patterns. We pattern all the time. The whole earth is a pattern. All of life is a pattern. And so when we see structure in pattern, that is just a natural process. It's not something to be scoffed at or to be dismissed. Yes, I did turn the moon around because I got us a little bit closer, and it's turned about 30 degrees or so, 25 degrees. All right, let's play a little bit of music here. Syncopated television coming through. Some of the oldies tonight.
Just with the cool chicks, their minds song found its way into the hot dogs done. It's fine, finger wine, enjoy the time until the products are gone. You're well, said you're well, said life is just with love and cool chicks. And I'm wanting to come like everyone say, oh yes, I'm real wild, till well, said why real wide, still well, till like it's get it good, get it good, get it good, get it good, get it. Syncopated television, suffering out of beds, separation information, slithering down the tracks. Syncopated television, coherent integration. Syncopated television, suffering out of beds, separation information, slithering down the tracks. Syncopated television, coherent integration. I've been a rough raider, calling up your heart in my mind. I won't pull no fader, sure, but just so much as ask questions. What's up with it now that got stuck to society? 8 billion are watching. These powers got minds and living every but I'm so for you till I'm capturing the stars for you forever. We could stay. But then I know when I feel that I can, and I've been that I wanted to see. Hear what you feel, the songs you hear that I've been living over hell, like water flowing up the wind. And I become most everything if I could just have one more night to look into your eyes.
Hopping in to say what's up to Cyber Sully and NGC. Lovely to see you. Thanks for your concern during the storm. Very lucky. Feeling blessed to be here. Always ungrateful. Great ungrateful tonight. So yeah, now I got camera direct to scope. Let's do some nice wide, not wide, zoom shots here. And, well, wide first, but then we'll really dig in to Theophilus, and I want to look at Proclus, we'll look at Pasadonius, and let me know if you have any particular spots you want to take a look at. 9:24 on the clock, going for maybe another hour here. Definitely going to check out some Saturn before the end of the show, so stick around. Let's see, I think this song is what I was looking at, and I was like, where's NGC? And there you are.
Bring me back, just bring me back out of the cold. Ooh, bring me back, just bring me back. I need you more. This cosmic revelation, we all have our bases to play. We preachers grinding against the grain. Built your world with nothing to fear but yourself. Apparitions that we bleed through. Every fear, your open wide soul modulation. You just come feel this ride so high, your love I'm craving. But I can't see it till you, ooh, just bring me back. Oh, bring me back.
been in here for a sec. I want to say what's up to Arfat. Welcome, Arfat. Yeah, looking at Aristoteles and Alexander. There's a little bit of chromatic aberration going on, but it's pretty amazing, this view right against the Terminator. Let's see. So this is kind of north of what? This is north of Sea of Serenity, and here's Pasadonius. So Pasadonius is something I've been wanting to show for a while, so here we go. I can actually reduce some of this chromaticism, chromatics. Thanks for the kind comments on the music, y'all. It'll bring me back and then keep you waiting. Linked it in the channel to the Bandcamp page, so if you want to go listen. Let's adjust some of these settings a little bit. So yeah, Pasadonius, this is on the rim of Sea of Serenity. And it's a pretty fascinating one. I feel like it's not getting the detail exactly that I want, but I'm going to try and zoom in one layer deeper. Yeah, I think you kind of have to be a bit more at an angle to view exactly like the floor of it. Right now it's not coming through perfectly. But you can see it pretty well. You can see this kind of folding of the structure, almost like a nested hexagon. You have this craterlet at the center, but you're not really seeing all the sinuous rills in this kind of like recursive fractaling. But I guess you can see, just if you look at the bottom, you'll see hexagon inside a hexagon, really. Let me just pull up my paint program. I'll show you what I mean. It's almost like braided. Like this braiding that's going on here. Right? You see that? But more so that it's just that you have recursive hexagons. Let me just try and center it for a moment. You have that. And then you have the one inside it. That's not really working. I guess the tracking is a little fuzzy. But anyway, you get the idea. It's almost like a shift or an echo of this hexagon that happened. Almost like it melted or kind of slid across the surface. Like a double wave. Alright, let's keep going here with the tunes. The micro tunes. No, all good, Cyber Sully. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. Saturday night, 9:30. Feeling good, feeling great. Let's play some catch. Just perfect middle of the show milestone. It's our milestone.
I left home at 17. Couldn't tell you if I was living a dream. What could I do? For a while I played imaginary man, don't you know? Your life is worth more than this. Catch me if you fall, catch me if you're low. The loot goes high and up as fast as you can go. Oh, catch me if you fall, catch me when you're low.
Alright, hopping in here. I want to say ciao to Mauricio. What's going on? My Spanish is not great, but it says siempre estoy expectante a sus transmisiones. Interactúo poco. I love this language, honestly. Gracias por el recibimiento. I really got to get my Spanish together. But thank you, Mauricio. Welcome. That was a little bit of catch, and I just want to... Did I miss anybody in here? I see Morgan Ellis. What's going on? Nice to see you. All right. And shout-outs to all the lurkers and old friends. Exactly. Sometimes I feel like if I call out a few people, I miss them. I don't want to miss anybody, but I see you're talking about Debbie Carson, and Patrick McNellis. Thinking about Ellie Wynn, of course, always. Jedi Princess. If I just call them, will they appear? Or they're just hanging out in the background. I hope Red Rum is okay. His mom. And sending out good vibes. And, you know, it's really tough for the people down who got hit by Ian. Fort Myers stuff. They're still finding bodies and crocodiles. It's absolutely nuts. I'm not trying to sound like I'm playing it down at all, because it's very upsetting, but it's also insane to kind of have survived it too. So trying to balance out the emotions the last couple of days. Feeling pretty bad for those folks. Lost Brooklyn, right? Copper Trops. We've seen a couple of OGs on like a week ago, I think, or 2 weeks ago. All right, so I wanted to talk about quickly what we're looking at. Like I wrote in the chat, right to left we got Theophilus, Cyrillus, and Katharina. And I've scribbled a bunch so you can see the hexagons right here. The main thing here that's great about Theophilus, and it still doesn't cease to amaze me, is like even the first time I zoomed in and saw Theophilus up close, this kind of amazing pine cone looking structure, these central peaks, of course, can really take you by surprise. And I don't want to say delude you, but you could have this idea that it might be a spacecraft, or it might be something crazy like an alien structure. but it really is more like ferrofluid in a way. It's almost the peaks of like magnetic fluid being drawn up Birkeland like an electric cable. And so I think looking at it now like that with structured geometry is a little less like, ooh, spooky, but it's a lot more empowering because you understand it better and truly connect with why it looks that way. But anyway, Theophilus looking amazing, side by side with Cyrillus, which also looks very hexagonal to the left, and then almost these really cool filamentary actions going across. But also looks like an apple. And if you look between Cyrillus and Theophilus, you'll see these kind of twisting filamentary landmasses. Ryan from North Carolina, heck yeah. Shout out your favorite OG in the chat. Help me remember. Remember Vision is Scary and Starlight Spectrum, who are true OGs. Who else? Yeah, throw Gus Miguel. I hope Miguel's doing good. Anyway, this whole region looks really amazing. Almost looks like an underground ocean, like the floor of an ocean that has been desiccated. NGC says reality is less weirder than aliens. I don't know. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's like it allows the ufology thing, the idea that life can emerge on other planets, to be its own thing for me. And that's important because I think this idea of ufology overtook physics in a way that that makes it very difficult to talk about physics and astronomy in a way that is exciting for people if you don't just immediately go to saying like they're aliens and extraterrestrials and space travel. Like I wanted to get back to the core of what space is about, which is one, the objects that we do have in view, like the planets and the moon, the stars. Like just those alone could be a huge amount of time spent just observing and feeling empowered by these objects versus having to have these hidden mysterious objects at the end of the galaxy. And I want to get away from that. So definitely feel like I've gotten away from it. When you look at the surface of the moon now, you can really relate to it, or at least I do. And I really understand it. I really feel with it. Whatever age it is, whatever, like if it's 100 billion years old, or it's 4 billion, or it's 10 million, doesn't matter. Just understanding the moon better has changed my life completely. You see that butterfly? Yeah. I mean, the butterfly and the apple and our hips and the bridge of the nose, that alone should prove lattice structure, like side-by-side hexagons. But you could go down the list with all these different nested shapes. I see Chris Kelly. What's going on? Great to see you. So I've kind of, so now I've separated it. So you have this kind of unified field, electric universe, consciousness being the ultimate reality. And then you can think about aliens and ufology and all this stuff from a context of like, okay, if there are extraterrestrials, then they're probably like us. If there's intelligence, it's probably patterned out of the pattern that we see. There's nothing outside the pattern that we are conscious of, simply because the pattern is the consciousness. And so nothing that is not pattern can be perceived. And therefore this idea that aliens are other than us, they still will be symmetrized. They'll have eyes on both sides. They'll have limbs. We can't even conceive of anything that isn't in our image, simply because we are the ultimate image of things. I really think it's that. I mean, it might sound very egocentric, but in a way, it is. That's the geometric embodiment of egocentrism, the geometric outline of egocentrism. Have I seen the FAA videos of two suns? I'm pretty certain, I don't know, I haven't seen that, but I'm not sure if that's, maybe if I'm speculating, there are ideas in conspiracy circles where there's an idea of two moons, like Rahu and Ketu, and the fact that basically the idea that there are hidden objects in our sky right under our noses, and there's a government agency that doesn't tell you about these hidden objects, and we're looking for these objects because they are mysterious. Maybe that's not what you're talking about, Mary, but that's I start to imagine when I hear about two moons or two suns. I just don't think we would miss a whole sun in our solar system. Same thing, I don't think we would miss like an object that covered the moon like Rahu, just because it's part of mythology. Granted, I don't know that for sure, but I just don't feel like there is evidence for anything that ends up being like a two sun image or two moon image or anything in the sky like that. Typically is like an effect of the lens of the camera that takes it, because it's very easy to like tilt the camera a little bit and take and duplicate things. And you see sundogs all the time, or moon dogs. Like, we do get refractive effects in the sky, but the idea of two suns just doesn't make a lot of sense, because our sun is so specific and the moon is so specific. Like, I think, again, it's more conceptual. It's like, why look for something even more mysterious when we already have a sun and a moon? You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm coming from. It's not to say that these things couldn't exist. It's just to say that I feel like people typically are always like, grass is greener first, without looking at like what we already have. And that's the Zen teaching too. It's reinforced by Zen teachings. So I'm pretty sure it's a lens effect, or it's somebody messing around. Like some of the big videos on YouTube, when you're looking at like moon 2022, you certainly won't get TakeBackSpace, but you'll get these videos of like, thing crashed into the moon, and it's like a complete CGI replication of like just compositing in After Effects, and it's got millions and millions of views, and a lot of the views are like confused as to whether it's real or not. And I'm like, how do we live in this reality where people are just so completely like taken by these videos, and yet we have videos of like the actual moon and you don't really see that sort of stuff. Now granted, like David, a brewer, the Colorado guy, like he did get a little flash on the moon during the last lunar eclipse, so you kind of do see flashes from time to time. But just conceptually, anyway, more so, these videos get hyped because people are like, I need to see something happen on the moon. The moon itself is so boring, but just show me something happening on the moon. And again, if you think about it from a Zen perspective, like that's always like, I need more. It's never enough. And I think if you kind of pull your mind back a little bit and start to think, you're like, no, maybe it is enough. Maybe the surface of the moon doesn't need alien bases to be interesting. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, that's a little rant. I've talked about it before, but it's so important to me to always, because it's easy to say, oh, I need more. I need a different moon. I need Planet X. I need Hollow Earth. I need conspiracies to hit that, to get that dopamine kick. And I understand it, right? But I think there's a bigger dopamine kick in looking at hexagonal craters and then looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, oh, I see the resemblance of lunar geology and human geology, right? Human geometry and lunar geology, and I see the correlation, and I understand why it happens, and I don't need any agency to tell me why it happens. I know it because I did it. I think that's so much more powerful than any conspiracy dopamine hit. It's like, so I tend to take double suns or double moons or conspiracies now, not with a grain of salt, but like they're one part of, they're like a filter that you put on the camera, and you're like, I'm going to look at it through this orange filter, and then somebody tells you, well, you could look at it through 100 other filters. What's the difference? You're like, but I like this orange filter. And I think where I'm coming from is like, I try and make shows that are all like a whole bunch of the filters, but then I say it's really never about the filter at all. It's really just about what you think you like about the filter. And I think that's more scientific than what science does now. Maybe that's arrogant, but I think science should allow for a broader picture of things, not such a myopic picture of things. All right. So I'm kind of keen on getting to Saturn in a little bit, but we still got some great moon. Let me go to the wide shot here for a sec. Very thankful the connection is held up tonight. So far, so good. So that's pretty gorgeous, gotta say. Got to say. Thanks, y'all. Cybercelly says, perhaps looking at the sun is like looking at the light at the end of a fiber optic. It's possible. I still feel like the sun basically is just like a node, a pearl on a string, so to speak, right? It's connected into space by twisting Birkeland filaments or twisting electrical currents, and it's still progressing through its lifetime. It's like maybe a teenager in terms of like what a star is. And it's blowing off steam, and it's convecting, and it's creating a lattice structure, and it's becoming more complex. And it's taking chances, you know. It interacts with the heliosphere by letting out solar flares and sending out solar wind or wind. It's not. I'm not saying it's wind. I'm just saying all these ideas, this air current, solar wind, is spin, and it's electricity really, spin and electricity, or oscillation and electricity. But anyway, the sun is communicating with the heliosphere up until the heliopause. So the heliopause is like the outer skin of the human biofield. It's also like the outer skin of the apple. Like at the beginning, the skin of the apple is right next to the seed, and then it ends up being the furthest out. So the birth of the sun is the heliopause. That's where it remembers its birth, and it works its way backwards. And so what's interesting about the sun is that I feel, or like any object in our solar system, I think it's all a fractal recursion. I don't think the sun operates one way and the Earth operates in a different way and Saturn operates in a different way. I think they all operate like humans and animals and bacteria and mushrooms and planets all behave similarly. And we behave along similar geometric paths and similar fractal paths. But there's a little bit of salt, and the little bit of salt gives everybody a bit of variance. And across large fractals, you get variance in speciation, you get variance in complexity of plasmoids. So a human is a chain of plasmoids, or Z-pinches, along a Birkeland filament, like our chakra system, and the two toroidal donuts above that are a 9-ring plasma ring donut system that experiences its biofield in a highly complex fractal order. And then you have something like a sun, which is still very primitive, experiencing the heliosphere as like an onion skin, the same way we experience our human biofield. It makes way more sense that it's that way than the fact that everything has its own different thing, and stars are stars, and planets are planets. And Jeffrey Walensky puts it very succinctly. If you imagine what scientists are saying right now, they're saying that an old person and a baby are not the same thing. Right? He's saying that, or he's also saying the way they age stars is like if you go to a nursing home and everybody's 100 and you're 40, then by association somehow you can be determined to be 100 years old, even though you're not, just because you're around 100-year-old people. So that's what mainstream does. I mean, I know it's kind of making a little bit of fun about it, but that in a sense is the world we live in. But electric unified field theory says that no, actually things are basically the same thing in different stages of evolution, or different stages of metamorphosis, or different variations on the theme. And that is a concept that is actually not only recursively fractal in what we see in our day-to-day, but really logical and empowering and holistic. And I see Ellie Wynn. I say Ellie Wynn, and Ellie Wynn shows up. I love it. Love to see you. How are the cats? How are you doing? Hope you're safe and doing well. I see Peter Battle. What's going on? Welcome, welcome. So yeah, anyway, I kind of went off on a rant on like the sun is basically a small, like a hydrogen atom, and the human system is like a stack of hydrogen atoms along an electrical string. Wingsley, Wingsley, you know which song I gotta play, right? Man, what a night, what a day, what a week, what a life.
I've been beaten from the heart. I know, no lie. I've been thinking about you all night. Why? No why. I've been waiting for your white light. No why. Oh, I've been thinking that you should be mine. So call me up, 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 and let's get down, 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 down. So call me up, 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 and let's get down, 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 down. Oh, you send me messages across the cosmic network, and you send me pictures from across the astral plane, and you send me cryptic kisses across the matching network. So call me up, 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 and let's get down, 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 down. So call me up, 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 and let's get down, 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 down. Somebody, somebody. Je t'attends, mon amour, grâce à tu es ainsi dans le monde que la même si même agitant la éternelle avec pendant son billet. Je suis là même que ton avant l'année chaque jour. Je t'attends, mon amour, avec les mecs sans agrévé. Et c'est mon âme magnétique, c'est l'amour magnétique, c'est mon amour magnifique. Cool running. No one, you wouldn't, 'cause one is rooted, whatever it takes, please. I've been dreaming from the heart, I no lie, been beaten from the heart, eyes, no why, no why. So call me up, 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 and let's get down, 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 down. So call me up, 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 and let's get down, 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 down.
All right, I should have actually lowered the volume. Let me do that a little more delicately. Oh, there we go. Fade out. Perfect. Freaking OCD over here. A little bit of will-powered. Mary nailed the joke tonight. Pup, pup, pup. Let's get pup, pup, pup. It's just hopping in. I'll play some more tunes, but great to see everybody hanging out. I want to show you these cosmic network lines and Sea of Serenity. Look at how amazing these are. It's just such an incredible sight. Like I was saying earlier, how just the simple nature of the moon now is so magical to me. Again, not to dismiss it, because who knows, there could be bases on the moon, right? There could be aliens, of course. But it's nice to know that I can just look at the Sea of Serenity and just get so much out of it without needing anything extra beyond, like, look at the surface features. The surface features look like your hand and your face. So, and I know why things are placed where they are. So look at very, very clear distinction here between Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility. You got, like, what is this straight line between the two different mares? It's amazing. Of course, it's a material distinction, but to get this boundary layer is something of note. And then around it, like to the bottom right, you see this kind of square of expansion, this diamond shape, a little orange diamond Phillips. And I guess also little micro craterlets along the filamentary lines and the braiding, especially this braiding right here in Sea of Serenity. I just noticed it so much more this time. It just looks like a root system or like an absolute perfect outline of a current. Let me know what you think. Let's see what song we're doing here. Hurricane? I think probably time for Hurricane.
No will for the ones you left, and I crawl inside you, fly. You're my hurricane. No sleep when I lost you. No sleep when I lost you. You're my
It's so much worse to just like abruptly stop a track than fade it out. I was like, maybe I'll just stop that one. Nope, also fade it out. Let's see what I'm going to play here. I'm just going to keep cruising down for a little bit more. Maybe 10 more minutes on the moon or 5 more minutes, given my patience here. Definitely want to go over to Saturn for a second. And the moon is about to crescendo, as you can see with the fringing. It's getting close to setting right now. Look at this other amazing little filamentary action going towards, what is this? Is this Rimma Hadley? Like this is maybe Hadley's rim? But this is in, I guess, northwest of Sea of Tranquility. That's what it is. It's like a 7 imprinted on the ground. I don't know, maybe something else. But lots of braids, lots of filaments. What song should I play? Maybe this jam right here while I look for another song. What's up, Aram Vorax? And you see, so I checked Luther, and all the references are right around this area right here. So everything Pasadonius, and to the left, top right of it is Luther A through K. But if you just want me to go along the rim of the moon, I shall do that regardless. It is a real place. It's these little micro craterlets in Sea of Serenity right next to Pasadonius. But if you think just outer rim, I'll just do the whole rim. And what else? Yeah, it's orange because it's setting right now, so the moon's almost near the tree line. So we'll do a little bit of the rim shot, and then head over to Saturn. What are we going to play here? Let's maybe do this jam right here, Fly On. Who's ready to go to Saturn? I know I am. That was a little tour of our moon. Tonight was absolutely amazing. Got to see it from so many different perspectives and see all the geometry. Definitely go back and replay it if you just got here, because did a lot of doodling and noodling. That was Fly On and then Grown to Like You, a couple of guitar instrumentals. I appreciate all the kind comments about the music. Want to say what's up to Cassandra showing up. Says waiting to see something pop off with some UFOs flying off the surface. Maybe one day. We'll see. Make sure you check out one of the videos that I have, which has some really interesting stuff flying across the moon. It's called 20 Real Astronomy Clips. Isn't that what it's called? Here, let me link it. Why not? Have some fun here. I can't even find my own best of. New here? Watch this. Okay, so share. I love how like made up images of UFOs have millions of views. And then this video, it's funny to me. I mean, who cares? Good people know about it. Most people don't. But it's super interesting. Check out this video and you'll see like a bunch of interesting things flying across the moon, hovering near the moon, a bunch of different stuff that I've captured on stream live with all you folks. Some of you will remember these. All right, ready to go to Saturn. Let's do it. What's the song that will take us there? I think. Yeah, so our moon is set behind the trees right now. Really good. Let's do... Gosh, going through all these songs, seeing what is formidable right now. Maybe something newer. It never takes me this long, but you need the right song if you're going to take a rocket ship to Saturn. I think this is the right one.
sharing my love. Turning laser pink violet, healing my life. Shining through the prison daggers, healing mine. 'Cause no matter what we do, counting the light. Shining through the prison daggers, losing my mind. Crawling through the chasm, dragon chasing my ride. Moving through the plasma, dragon rhythms in time. Rhythms in time.
Prism dagger, and made our way to Saturn here, but I feel like actually Saturn's kind of a bit at the airstream, or the point in the sky where you have a lot of turbulence. Mosquitoes, get out of here. So yeah, I was trying to focus it, but I feel like it is focused, but it's blurring out occasionally, or a little bit more than occasionally. Either way, still amazing shot of Saturn here. Right on the 8-inch scope and the Sony. So I added the GPS device that I have on the 8-inch like it wasn't last night. I think the tracking is a little bit more stable. It's not perfect. I mean, honestly, I read about these setups that are so precise, and I have this like balance on a staircase. Like, I'm kind of amazed that the tracking is this good, to be honest. Like the 11-inch, it bugs me when it's not tracked because that's on a perfectly flat surface. But this 8-inch does wonders with its like flimsy little tripod. Well, it's not flimsy at all actually, but it is wobbly. You can see all the wiggle because it's like, or the wobble because literally the whole place vibrates when people pass on the road, or the air conditioner vibrates. Anyway, a little shot of Saturn here before I close it out. Tonight was fun. I feel like if Saturn were super sharp, I'd stay on a bit longer, but I'm going to take the opportunity to not get too exhausted. I just got my back sorted out. So I'm feeling a little bit better. I'm going to cut the stream in a second. Let's play one more song. Dreamboat, of course. And I appreciate all of you hanging out tonight. Nice to see everyone. I see all you new people too. I'll be back again tomorrow or the day after, depending on the weather. I feel like it's gonna be clear, but you never know. Yeah, I really feel like if Saturn were sharper, maybe I'd kind of go for it, but this is a sign. Always read the sky correctly. So Saturn wants to be kind of fuzzy tonight. We'll let it go. Thanks NGC, Ellie Wynn, Cassandra, Cyber Sully, Amy G, Rich Goad, Arum Vorax, Mary Quite, Chris Kelly, Carolina, Dr. Ayad, Morgan Ellis. Let's see, I haven't done roll call in a long time. Let's see, did I miss a bunch of you? I hope I didn't miss too many people, but if I did, Peter, I see in there, Peter Battle, Shout outs to all the people who didn't show tonight. If you're reading this, if you're catching this tomorrow, hope you're doing great. I will see y'all very soon on another stream. Let's ride out together. Take care, y'all.